aboard Miami, West Palm Beach, and Fort Lauderdale. And we'll talk a little bit about Orlando as well, as we're part of GOA's intermodal center as part of their airport as well. So quick history. I think a lot of people probably already know some of our background, but we are very fortunate to have a set of assets that really have a legacy back to Henry Flagler and the development of the state. So we own a corridor that's 351 miles long, starting in Jacksonville, ends in downtown Miami. Own it to be simple. It's an incredible corridor because so many cities have grown up around this corridor from this original transportation system that Henry put together. And so we're just fortunate to have this sort of legacy asset that not everyone that's looking at TOD is as fortunate as we are to have this sort of infrastructure in place. But we're very glad to have it. Florida East Coast Industries is the parent company. We're in several different business. We have a logistics business. Flagler is the office and industrial developer around the state. Parallel Infrastructure deals with right-of-way management in regards to crossings and telecommunications, all sorts of different businesses that deal with the management of right-of-ways. And then All Aboard Florida, which is sort of our reintroduction of passenger rail to the state of Florida. So Henry Flagler's passenger services ended in the late 1960s, and when the highway program came in, everyone basically got off the trains and got off to 95, and I think we're at a capacity point where that's probably we've run out of capacity on 95, and maybe there's some other alternatives that might work for people moving around the state. Our company itself is broken into two different groups. So we have people that are focused primarily on the transportation side of our business, designing trains, scheduling, ticketing, dealing with all the safety concerns around the actual transportation side of the company. And then we've got a real estate side of our company that really is focusing on the TOD part of that, and dealing with the real estate. And that's really where my background and what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. I know very little about the Express. There's a passenger rail service. I can answer questions, but don't trust that I know the right answers. But certainly on the real estate side, I think I understand more about it. This sort of leads a little bit back to sort of the Henry Flagler piece. There's a great opportunity just because of the growth of the state and the connectivity of our line to to the cities that are growing, and the power of our state from a population growth standpoint, and from the fact that we are truly one of the most visited spots in the world, and we have to deal with a lot of people that come in and put stress on our infrastructure. Being sort of the first private rail, express rail company, there's been a learning curve for us in regards to train design, understanding, what the right level of service is, what the right design is, where the right locations for the stations are. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail. But we've basically been working through that. Trains are being built now by Siemens out in California. So we have made a lot of progress in the last 2 years to keep moving that forward. But that part of it is underway and going. We have 4 major cities that we're connecting. We have 32 trips per day. We have 16 trains leaving Orlando, 16 leaving Miami. Hourly service basically during the peak hours, a little bit slower in the overnight hours. In Orlando, you can get from Miami to Orlando in 3 hours, about an hour to West Palm Beach, and about 30 minutes to Fort Lauderdale. In Orlando, we are part of the multimodal hub that they're building as part of the South Terminal of the development of the Orlando Airport. We hope to be the future home of Sunrail's expansion. So our rail, Sunrail, people mover, rental car facilities, very much like the MIC in Miami, that we're going to be in sort of the center of the activity of the Orlando Airport. And I think wherever we looked at where we wanted to be in each of these cities, being connected to the other forms of transit was sort of the primary target for how we picked locations for where we might locate our stations. Downtown West Palm Beach, just north of City Place, off of Rosemary, tried to be really in the center of West Palm Beach, and there again, connecting to whatever transportation systems are in place. We're close to the existing Tri-Rail station. We're on the trolley system, and so there again, trying to find a location that was really central. And then also making sure that our design incorporated the ability to have future Tri-Rail capabilities, because the Tri-Rail trains and our trains are slightly different from a design perspective, so we had to make sure that our platforms were adaptable to both systems, and that whatever we were developing now did not preclude the ability to bring Tri-Rail to each of these stations as well. This is our downtown Fort Lauderdale station. There again, in the sort of just Broward Boulevard and the Los Olas riverfront. Have 6 acres there to develop in and around the station, and we'll get into some of the programming around that. But at each of these nodes, we're anticipating retail, residential, and office, whatever is appropriate for the particular area, so the program changes a little bit. But that's really what we're working through today is what those programs look like. And we're out talking to the users, quite frankly, about, what are you looking? So we're meeting with office tenants. We're meeting with, residential users about, what's the type of product that's appropriate for these stations? What's the type of target audience we're going after for each of these stations? And it varies a little bit between city to city. There again, here's a map of Fort Lauderdale. The other interesting thing in regards to government centers and government offices, another sort of a criteria point for us in regards to connectivity between these cities is how can we make sure that we're close to where a lot of the working population are to be able to connect that and the government centers in each of the 3 locations. In Miami, we happen to own 8-9 acres of land that was the original terminus of Henry Flagler's Grand Central Station in Miami. So we owned a piece of land that was sort of in the heart of downtown Miami already. It was being very underutilized as a surface parking lot. The other benefits we really had is that Metro Rail and Metro Mover were already there and very actively used in that location. So we had 2 Metro Mover stations and 2 Metro Rail stations at our station already. So it was an obvious point to be able to connect all those pieces together. There again, connectivity being the most important thing, the ability to have all those systems, whether they're intercity, whether they're commuter, whether they're people movers, that all of that could connect in one spot. I think certainly for Miami, this will be sort of the first time that Tri-Rail, Metro Rail, Metro Mover, all aboard Florida Rail will all be in one building under sort of one roof and a connectivity. And we think that will increase ridership for all forms of transportation by having that connectivity, solving some of those last mile issues. And so the location there was very good for us. We're also seeing this incredible growth in the urban core of Miami. So there again, that sort of central location between all these communities that are growing at sort of a record pace. Certainly that location helps us be aggressive, quite honestly, about the type of development we can do in and around each of the stations. The dynamics that are going on in downtown Miami right now are incredible from a residential and retail and office perspective, which gives us the ability as a developer to be more aggressive. And I say that because some of the development you do is very complicated and very difficult. As you see, this is sort of an outline of our plan for Miami. 3 of the buildings you see to the north end of the station there are built over active rail. So we've got 3 platforms for all aboard Florida and 2 platforms for Tri-Rail at 50 feet above grade. The trains are elevated above the road systems, the flow of traffic to the streets below. But when you're building apartments and office buildings on top of active rails, it's very complicated from a construction standpoint. So we had to know what we're building here before we get the trains running, basically. So we had to be as big and as bold as we could about building how many apartments and how much office can we build in the market support. Because once we build those, the opportunity to come back and build more basically goes away. There's air rights opportunity to sort of gone. Once those trains are running, it becomes very problematic to come in and build over that and without being disruptive to the rail systems below. But there again, we looked here in downtown Miami about the right mix of all different services. Not just building apartments without support of office and retail. You need the retail to support the living. We're really trying to create a neighborhood in each of these cities where you've got support for each of the elements supporting each other. The transportation certainly helps when you look at the ridership from our rail and Tri-Rail, Metro Mover, and Metro Rail. You're talking somewhere between 9 and 11 million people a year coming in and out of the station, 25,000 people a day moving in and around here. That drives retail sales. So people, Starbucks does very well if there's, 25,000 people that need a cup of coffee on their way to work or not. So there's certainly demand drivers around retail. When we got into the planning side of that, we ended up, going around the country and really looking at other TOD stations, Grand Central Station, DC Union Station, San Francisco Ferry Building, looking at other examples of the type of retail that supports transit passengers, which is slightly different than neighborhood retail, which is slightly different than mall retail. But there was a specialty there that we wanted to make sure that we kind of got the right mix going within our retail programming, and that we had the right type of uses for people to service the transit movement going on there, then also to service the residences that are living up and above it, and then the office tenants that are up above it as well. This is just sort of a street level plan of Miami. And I guess the point here more is sort of back to me a little bit in regards to how much time it took to figure out how to build these structures and make them all live and work together. So let's see if I can get the pointer thing to work here. This is a station entrance on the south end. So this is the transit entrance to the building, and then this is the main transit entrance to the building. So you've got a ground level that supports retail, and then entrances to all the overbuilds above it. You've got a mezzanine level that supports transit passengers and additional retail, and then you've got the three buildings going above it. But we had to basically, at a ground level planning perspective, we had to incorporate two station entrances. We've got the office lobby and the office entry building here. We have a residential tower entrance here and a residential tower here. We have loading components, servicing and loading docks for all these facilities, and then street level retail all the way along Northwest First. It was very complicated to make all that fit, like trying to get vertical transportation to fit, trying to get loading to fit, trying to make all those elements work together in a structure that has 5 active trains operating at a 50-foot level above it from a design perspective was a real challenge for us. And we continue to work through some of the details of it, but it's some of the challenge you get into when you really try and integrate development in the midst of transit and working through transit. As you can see here, we've got Metro Mover literally coming right through the building, and then Metro Rail running along the back of our building too. So from a construction perspective, we've got 2 active transportation systems that are running today that can't be disrupted as we build the project. We also have a building just to the west. This is going to be a neighborhood grocery store. This is a parking facility for a lot of the transit passengers, and then we also have a 100,000 square foot office building that sits on top of the parking structure. So a true mixed-use building there, supporting the neighborhood with the kind of retail that people need if they want to live in this neighborhood, and then other type of retail along Northwest First that are really going to be supportive of the transit passengers and sort of a high street retail environment. So the station from the outside, you can kind of get an idea of the 2 stories of retail here, the trains moving along the top, and then these are our 2 residential towers that sit above that. Just another image of the entrance. This is basically where the entryway to all the ticketing passenger is, and this is on the retail on that side. Another view. So this is basically when you come into the station. So now you're walking into the station, you're a transit passenger, and you want to go on your way to Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. In Miami, you'll come in the station on the ground level here. So you can check bags. If you want to check bags, very much like a European rail system, though, if you want to bring your bags with you, there's no, the security kind of airport level security scanners are not part of this. It's very easy to get on and off. Take your bags with you if you want, but also check bags if you'd like to as well. You arrive on the mezzanine level. We basically have a passenger lounge to the left here. This is sort of the entrance to the passenger lounge on the left-hand side. And then we've got a retail environment of about 60,000 square feet of open retail. That'll include restaurants and bars and all sorts of retail stores that are very similar to like a DT Union Station or a San Francisco Ferry Building, those kind of environments where there's lots of different food choices, shopping, convenience items for people that want to get off the train. We also think of this for each of these cities as a representation of the place they're coming to. In regards to a lot of people coming from Orlando, this will be some of their first experiences of coming to Miami. So we also think there should be a nod in each of these stations to the place that they're arriving and somewhat be representative of the place that they're arriving. There again, this shows a little bit of a slice through the building, some of the complexity of dealing with transportation on the back, retail at the median level, 5 active rails. You can see a little bit the difference between the platform heights. These are the higher platforms for our trains. For these 3 trains are the all-aboard trains, and here's the future capacity for Tri-Rail and the Tri-Rail trains on the left-hand side. But there again, just from a construction and design standpoint, definitely caused some challenges for us to make all this work in one box. Talk a little bit about the residential development. Here we really, there again, we went around the country and looked at other TOD examples. There's certainly a very active, vibrant residential market in Miami. I don't know that all of it is really focused around transit. And as we looked in Chicago and New York and DC and Denver, there was really examples of this young urban population that wanted to be in and around transit. Maybe they didn't want to have to own a car, but wanted to live in that core. Miami is one of those markets that's become very expensive to live in the urban core from a standpoint of just where pure rents are. So our focus became about developing a product that was maybe not everywhere in Miami, that's more smaller units, more urban design. You spend less time maybe in your unit and more time in the amenity areas, so they're smaller. We've got 70% of our units are studios and 1 bedrooms. They're smaller square foot units to try and keep those monthly rents down. I think 70% of our units rent between $1,800 and $2,800 a month, which is sort of a target for us to keep in that sort of affordability factor and not just make this sort of some sort of luxury product that no one could really afford and to be around. As part of that, we designed this amenity deck, and I'll go back a little bit, where we span both buildings and connect both. There's basically parking structure underneath and then amenity deck. So we've got a 2.2-acre park that sits about 130 feet above grade. It becomes this big open amenity platform that's a connection between the 2 towers. From a planning perspective, one of the other real challenges we had was parking. When you've got 5 active platforms and basically a 200-foot wide piece of land, there was no way to ramp in any way traditionally cars up to a garage system. So we've gone back, we're looking through technology now. It's basically be elevator-driven parking. There's robotic parking technologies now. But I think as we get into more of this urban development, that type of technology is going to become more mainstream, because in these compact sites, it becomes very difficult to use traditional ramping. And there again, you get in the elements of Miami now where you've got buildings that have 14 levels of parking structure before you actually get to any uses, and it becomes quite dizzy and quite frankly to drive 14 levels, and that vertical commute time becomes impactful to the residents and users of the real estate. From an office program, we've got 3 different office components. These 2 on the north end are under construction today. This is a future tower that will be sort of a part of our phase 2. Incredible to see the actual user response to office as we're developing in all 3 markets. As we're talking to users today, and we're from a commitment standpoint, we're almost 50% leased on both of these office components, which surprised us. The amount of companies that want to connect to talent in the Tri-County area, as we sat down and talked to the actual user groups and said, okay, what would you think about having an office here in Miami, but also being connected to your office in Fort Lauderdale and connected to your office in Miami? And then we got into these discussions about, well, not only that, now my connectivity to talent, my ability to hire someone that might not want to live in downtown Miami, would like the style of living in Broward or West Palm Beach, but the job opportunity happens to be in Miami. All of a sudden, from that employer standpoint, their net became much wider in their ability to sort of attract talent. And so being at the station, physically at the transit, became somewhat of an element that they've never even considered before. We talked to one company that was 10 years ago, I think they're going to be one of our first tenants in this building, but 10 years ago, they had to make a decision of whether they put their headquarters in Broward or Miami. And it was, for them, it was a big challenge of like, there was pluses and minuses to both. They were sort of like, I wish this opportunity was there 10 years ago, because now I don't have to make such a distinction between where my business is going to be anchored, because I have connectivity to both of those things. So we've really seen a difference in that, and it's reflected in the ability, the amount of people that are interested in leasing space directly at the station. Another shot of the office building on the north, parking above the transit there. there again, not a large office building, 190,000 square feet, but right now we're, from a rental rate perspective, demand perspective, it's incredible to see what the demand's like, and we wish we could build more, quite frankly. We're restricted by the number of parking spaces and the complexity of building in regards to how much we can actually build there. Here's some of the views. So you're looking on the left-hand side up the tracks, north part of the station, looking up the tracks towards Midtown and Edgewater neighborhoods, looking out to the east, Miami Airlines Arena, and I guess even more importantly maybe is the fact that all the vacant lots here. So I mean, we're sitting in this area of Miami that has really been underdeveloped for quite a time now. Miami World Center, basically, where it sits, where you see these vacant lots. So you'll see a big change going on in Miami as the next 4 or 5 years go on as these areas become developed. But I think it's an opportunity to really create a new, vibrant urban core in this part of Miami. Another shot of our office building. We have an amenity level gym. This is the building we have to the west. 90,000 square feet of office sitting on top of parking and ground level retail. But there again, more of this is about programming. How much space can the market absorb? What are the pricing like for each of the products? And how can we integrate that into sort of a cohesive plan where all of these elements work together and feed off of each other? And then lastly, just kind of a quick timeline of sort of where we are and where we're going from a development perspective. So we started construction on all 3 of the south stations. So basically, Miami is under construction. Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach stations are all under construction. Several of the TOD projects, pretty much all the ones in Miami except for the major tower, is under construction. We're in final planning stages for components in Fort Lauderdale for West Palm Beach, in regards to office and residential development there. So from a TOD perspective, we think by the end of the year, a lot of the phase 1 TOD will be under construction. Basically, as we work through all the infrastructure improvements that we need to do along the tracks through early 2016, we get the first trains delivered basically October, November of 2016. We've got to do testing of those trains. Our segment will run first between West Palm Beach and Miami. As the Orlando Airport facility is getting built, it's scheduled a little bit later than our initial opening. So we're going to start running our service for the first probably 4 or 5 months, basically from March of 17 to sort of September of 17. We'll be running service between those cities and then on to Orlando as soon as that facility is ready. So there you see early 2017 an opening there, and really by the end of 2018, we expect the whole system to be up and running fully, all the trains delivered, basically 10 different train sets, and at that point we expect to be fully operational. We'll continue to look at other TOD opportunities. There's all sorts of other opportunities in regards to land and development and other partners that we'd like to work to, but I think this is sort of the overview of where we are up to date. So, any questions or anything you'd like more detail on, or anything I missed? Sure.
The next step, maybe the Tri-Rail Coastal Link.
Yeah.
Stopping at intermediate stations in South Florida. Will your company be at all interested in being involved in station area development of those intermediate stations?
Yeah, I think as a TOD developer, I think we would be interested in figuring out where the best locations are and what's the appropriate development going on there. We don't necessarily control exactly where those stations are, but I think as a developer and someone who's not an expert in TOD, we're learning as we go. But I think we would continue what we've done here and take that maybe to a slightly smaller scale to the other opportunities along the East Coast expansion. Yeah. Sure.
So we're very good here on climate change adaptation and what climate change considerations went into planning, station planning, and anything else related to this service?
Yeah, I think from a sort of a sustainability standpoint, from a pure real estate development standpoint, we looked at things like LEED certification, and we're doing that at all our stations to minimize the impact of the development we're doing. I think more importantly, as we think about sustainability, it's about getting the 3 million cars off the road. And the idea of finding other forms of transportation, taking cars off the road, and then more importantly, linking to other transportation systems so the system works well and truly can create an environment where people don't need a car to get in and around and move. But from a pure real estate development, it's been more planning around LEED certification and those sort of things from a real estate perspective.
If I could just add, the historic planning of this rail corridor, going back to Mr. Flagler, the highest ground. This rail corridor was planned on the high ground of South Florida. So that's a real advantage for development in this corridor.
Yeah.
Other low-lying areas starting to have problems. It could be a real selling point. This corridor is the highest ground.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sure, to the back. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
I'm just a little careful to understand why we still don't do garages for example, even though it's the offices that we feel like there's a job parking downtown, and I think that it's only been one of the goals that we have to TOD and region that we still require those garages.
I think it's a really good point. But I'll be honest, we struggled with it a lot in regards to certainly the residential development and the office development. And we looked at a lot of cities like Chicago and New York where there's zero parking. And honestly, we struggled from an investment standpoint that you want to be as pioneering as you can without impacting your ability to actually get it done. And so because there's not a lot of examples of this, what we did is we ratcheted down those levels to the point we thought we could get away with it. For example, we need to go get traditional bank financing to build the real estate. So when you go to try and talk to a bank about getting construction financing for a $300 million residential component, it's difficult already because of the environment we're in. It becomes really difficult when you say, by the way, we're going to be the first person that does zero parking. They basically say, well, great, go find another bank to take that risk. We're not, but I think your point is absolutely well made. Our hope is that as we continue to densify the area, that we'll become less and less reliant on the parking. For all the retail we're building, 180,000 square feet, we're only building 154 parking spaces for retail. So we're very underserved then. Yeah.
There's some really cool things they're doing about converting parking garages and repurposing them. So say in 10 years, you guys say, hey, look, Ben, we told you we didn't all the parking.
Yeah.
And then if you think about it now in your early stage planning, you can design garages to be repurposed and built out if you think about that ahead of time.
Yeah, we've actually, these are precast panels basically on the outside of the garage. So if you can imagine, and then there's elevator service that are going to each of these floors. So it's basically 3 levels of parking within that block. You could basically punch out the precast, use the elevators, and have 3 floors of office space basically sitting underneath the residential pallets that are still connected to the core below. If you have that ability to sort of go back and look at that ability to get rid of it. Yeah, so yeah, I agree. Sure.
With the Western Expressway, I just like to say that the FCC is a great partner. Back to the office, everybody flows about how cooperative and what a great work for them. And happy to have it.
Well, that's great. Us too. I think the partnership has been fantastic. I think the rising tide lifts all waters. I think for us, it's about connecting to all the systems appropriately. And there again, not designing something that precludes anything smart in the future. You can't think of everything, but there again, if we didn't design our stations that at least had the ability to have other forms of transportation be part of it, it would be somewhat irresponsible.
I'd like to follow up on your parking point. We're doing some research for another station area on that particular issue. Our economic development consultant is doing a study on areas that have manufactured third generation communities, and what they're finding is that we start out with a significant reduction in parking, and then work down to zero parking as the market
And I think that's, we have that future tower that we're developing. The idea is, as we're bringing on other phases and as people get more comfortable with transit, more people are actually using it, we can, each development, right now we're developing just slightly less than one parking space per unit, which is still aggressive for some standards, but we hope to get that down to 0.25 by the time we're really getting down there. And just to your point, we hope that that's sliding scale.
Real quick on the local, the intermediate station coming on the coastal. On every station it's going to be different, but in my case, I would say there will be a demand for public parking. Like pure TOD is the goal, and we'd like to get to that. But in order to have political support to get into this kind of transit development, you have to offer something to the residents of the surrounding area that may not be like tied right into transit accessibility, but they would like to drive the car, park, and go to West Palm or Miami.
We've had to build parking facilities at each of our stations that are purely transit parking, right? Because we still know people need to get to the stations. And I think as part of the future development of future stations on the East Coast expansion, same thing. So we're going to have to sit down and work with Tri-Rail and say, okay, each of these stations, where it's going to be, but where can we either utilize existing parking or to try and offset some costs because it's so expensive, or if we can't build parking, how smart can we be about parking and integrating that with a real estate development that maybe has a shared parking component that still minimizes the impact of how many parking spaces we have to build to make the system work. But I don't even get away from it exactly, but it's hopefully to minimize it or at least be smart about it that those parking spaces are maybe used at multiple day points and not just one-time use. Yeah, back to you.
I think we're going to see a shift because I've been reading a lot about Alex Bravo, who's the new director of Miami Independent, which is actually saying he wants to make Miami car optional. I think that what we really need to invite financial bankers to meetings like this and have discussions about how we can reduce and eliminate parking. I know that we have told people in California finance about how can we get the financing when you're thinking about constructing a TOD, but we said that there's no way of knowing something's truly going to be a TOD, and then by the time it is, all the costs go up. But I think we're going to start to see that shift, and I just feel that for anyone who lives outside Miami, like myself, the minute it's the H&R Center, it's the heat, and I think a lot of it is because we haven't had the regional transit move directly downtown, physically. Yeah. And, I really am excited about this because that means mobility and access to opportunities for people who are going to be the real community. So I think this is really amazing to see some of the developers and some of the finance people.
I agree. We have that educational process for them. And we have to bring in case studies from other areas because if they're bakers that are really concentrated in Florida, they're probably not seeing these sort of things. And we're like, let's talk to your New York guys and your Chicago guys. Maybe they have a better understanding of what, that we're really not taking the kind of risks that maybe they think we're taking, that this is just smart planning but the reality has been a sort of a slow educational process of getting through that, and we're trying to push it, but I think it's going to take a while. But I think your point's right. It's all about educating people about how TOD works and using the right sort of examples of places where it's been done well. We actually took a big group of people out to Denver to see the Denver Union Station, the development that's going on there. It's incredible to see the growth that's going on there. So we took some people there, and we're trying to sort of educate people, both public and private, about here are the examples and here's what we aspire to be as we do these things. So, yes, sir. Yes.
I was interested in the affordability part of this.
Yeah.
What was that income that was necessary for that kind of
The basic numbers we ran run it somewhere between $60,000 to $80,000 household income range to support that. There's different ways to calculate that. It's not affordable housing, so I don't want to say that we're targeting a true affordable housing. We're certainly in Miami just trying to step back a little bit from the high-end housing that's targeted towards like Latin and South American buyers. They're becoming, $4,000 or $5,000 for a 1 or 2 bedroom. And there's just people that really price them out of that market. So we're trying to create a product that is a step back from that. It's probably not all the way a step to affordable housing yet. But there again, the cost to build above these rail lines has been staggering for us. From our standpoint, to build in downtown Miami is expensive now, but the complications we've had to do from a structural standpoint to separate the vibrations from the trains, from the active real estate, those kind of issues we've struggled with have ended up increasing cost of the project. And so it's not affordable, but we're just trying to make it as affordable as possible.
So top floor, we have a good portion of the station getting close to the various interstations, the Tri-Rail and Metro Rail. But in Orlando, I know you touched on some rail, and I know there's a future expansion down to Knoxville County. Have they approved a future phase to the airport, or is that?
They're working. I think that phase 3 is what they call the airport expansion. They're working on it. I don't think they have it fully funded yet. Our hope is by bringing our rail there, the pressure to connect all these systems becomes more and more, and they're willing to, they're able to get the allocations they need to make that step. I don't think it's done yet. It's certainly in the planning stages, and I think everyone is supportive of it. Just there again, there's not enough money for every project to be done, but I think that's what they're working on. Yes.
You mentioned that it's going to be mostly studios and 1 bedrooms. Are there going to be more like bedrooms?
Yeah, that was about 70% of it. So the balance is 2 bedrooms and 3 bedroom units. We actually got some new concepts that are basically 3 bedrooms with a shared living room that are almost like dorm type setups. But yeah, there's a mix of everything. It's just there again the ability to try and put an emphasis on the low monthly rents by creating smaller units.
Yeah, because I used to live in Bristol, and I know a lot of people that live there, and a lot of people, there are those, a lot of folks, international folks that own units and everything, but a lot of people live in booming because it's so expensive for that down here.
Well, I think these are going to be truly apartments, or professionally run apartments, rather than renting a condo, which I think is what you see a lot of downtown Miami. I do that. I rent it. I'm in downtown, and I rent a condo. My landlady's in Guatemala, and I sort of check every month. It's great. There's no one there to fix it other than me. So I think there's an ability and a want for people to actually have sort of a professionally run apartments where if there's a problem, there's someone there to help fix it. And you can actually have pets, and you can have a more normal sort of life than some of the existing products that are today.
Your response to concerns of the right nearby there is the historic Overtown neighborhood of how people could then impact that area.
Certainly. I mean, we've worked a lot with the CRA to try and make sure that we incorporate our development as part of the Overtown neighborhood and really look at that. So we've got several different programs that we're working with them. One is we're going to have a food and beverage program. We're going to have a sort of a food marketplace that has small vendors and different food options around that. And as part of that food program, we've actually worked with Miami College to create a food truck program where we're going to create basically an educational course that educates someone to be able to run their own food truck. And it's really targeted towards the residences, the existing residences of Overtown, creating job opportunities for them, where we will basically fund and pay for a food truck and let them basically have it for 2-3 years so they can basically kick off a business and or work in one of the F&B venues within our project. We have several other musical education piece where we're working with some prominent folks that are in jazz history. The history of Overtown and the music history of Overtown is incredibly rich, and so really sort of tying back to those roots and sort of bringing back some of the glory of the Overtown neighborhood before 95 and pre-95 got dropped on top of them. And bifurcated program, it's a really vibrant community there, and we feel like we're part of that community, so we're trying to do that. We're also, we just met with the group that basically organized the farmers market, and there's an area called Sawyer's Walk that basically goes from our station right through the Overtown neighborhood to 95. And we're working to activate a true farmers market Saturdays and Sundays for people to bring fresh produce And it also becomes a bit of a food desert. If you look in some of these neighborhoods, they don't have great grocery stores. They have convenience stores that don't have the level of fresh produce and fresh foods that you would want them to in these sort of neighborhoods. So part of our commitment about trying to bring a grocery to the neighborhood, trying to bring farmers market to the neighborhood too, is part of bringing a real neighborhood feel like that, but also bringing some of the things that are there, fresh fruits, vegetables.
When you once the Orlando station is completed, will you run train sets just between Miami and West Palm still?
Yeah, I think, based on our frequency, I think there again, it's a bit of an unknown, right? So we've done lots of studies and where we think the population movements are going to be. But we know that there might be things that we don't know from a capacity standpoint. So we're trying to build in some additional capacity. So within those 10 train sets, there's capacity within that to run special trains or to run different operations. One of the things we talked to the Miami Heat about, they want to sell tickets to Broward County residents and more connectivity to Broward. And said, well, could you put on a Miami Heat train? Could you have a train that leaves West Palm Beach and then Fort Lauderdale that are rapid Miami Heat colors and bring everyone to downtown and gain them back? So we have the ability to do that sort of thing. So we're trying to figure out how that works. If there's enough frequency of travelers that are just between that core, then we have the ability to do that. The problem, the most difficult thing is scheduling the training capacity and impact to the one of the things that the New River Bridge at Fort Lauderdale, I'm trying to minimize the number of crossings. So there's some training capacity, but there's also some logistical issues that becomes, that we've got to be careful with, that we're not overtaxing the corridor as well. Okay. Yes, back there.
Yes, a question for you about the development program in Fort Lauderdale and West Palm.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there wasn't enough time to get into that detail, but
Sure.
just plan to help see quantity of the price point that you're anticipating and those other two ones?
Sure. So in West Palm Beach, we own about 3 acres right adjacent to our station. It's between sort of Rosemary and the tracks. And we're in sort of pre-development of a residential development, ground level retail apartments, somewhere between 275, 300 apartments on top of 16,000 square feet of retail. Really haven't gotten into price point yet of what those units would be. Part of that facility will be some of the parking for the station as well, so there'll be some joint use in the parking within the development. But really, that's the target right now. We don't own a lot of land in West Palm Beach, quite frankly. I wish we did, but I think there'll be other developers around us that will have as many opportunities as we will, because we think that'll become a pretty central hub. But that's really the plans we have for West Palm Beach. In Fort Lauderdale, we have about 6 acres of land on both sides of the tracks. We are focused day one on getting the station up and ready for the operations. We're building a garage adjacent to that to handle the traffic capacity. And then we've got a site adjacent to that, and we're looking at a residential development and an office development for the same site and trying to now doing the analysis right now, which one we're going to go with first. There'll be some element of office and some element of residential. Both will have some ground level retail component to it. And it's really just a matter of working through the market conditions and then also talking to users on a pre-lease standpoint about where the activity might be.
Have you guys looked at the estimated cost of rent and transportation costs around that area compared to what it would be if someone lived at a station anywhere?
Yeah, we've tried to spend a lot of time. We throw out this word called a TOD premium and talk about the TOD premium of, if you were going to rent an apartment on top of a station, how much more is that worth to someone than if it's 4 blocks away? And we use examples in like the Arlington corridor and DC and other places that to try and extrapolate that. Quite honestly, it's pretty hard data to derive really precise numbers around. There's examples of it, but then there's examples that don't necessarily flow that way. I don't think there's if you look at like downtown Denver and the shift from downtown Denver to Lodo, that's probably one of the more interesting examples. We looked at the residential development there. Basically, the apartments in Lodo, at least their absorption rate is 30% higher than in downtown, which is sort of a correlation between those two. Now, is all of that attributable just to transit, or is it also attributable to the fact these where all the new buildings are going in, and therefore there's higher absorption? So it was hard to break some of that data to really make it precise. What we do know is there's a TOD premium. What's really difficult for us is to really pinpoint an exact number and say, yeah, you're going to get 20 cents more a foot rent for your units here than you will there. It's more of a subjective analysis that we've had a hard time getting very precise with. Yes.
Related to the Fort Lauderdale station, for the near term, what's being done in terms of the safety and security? And I see it in two ways. One, just getting to downtown, probably both for over.
Yes.
Interesting. And then just the neighborhood there is never developing. So in the near term, are those discussions being held? I know that we do like to things about it, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think for us, I think, one of the things we really want to be able to figure out is a way to connect to the wave car. Right? So right now, our initial development is on the other side of the tracks of where the wave car is running. There's the bus facilities right there. So, we've had some discussions of, is there a way to redevelop the bus facility? What we would love to do is have a connection directly to the wave car, and have the wave car be the way to safely traverse Broward Boulevard. From a pedestrian standpoint, it's a daunting road to walk. I think I would be pretty scared to try and make it across that road on a regular basis. So the idea is, how do we connect to those light rail systems that are going to be implemented that would help traverse that? But we are looking at that, and we would love to be part of a redevelopment of that entire area, quite frankly, to make it a safer, more pedestrian-friendly, more walkable area. And I think, everyone's been working with us about, I think everyone wants that to happen. So I think it's been a lot of dialogue, but there's a lot of moving pieces to make all that work.
And then also just to focus on the regional transportation plan in Palm Beach and Miami, we're going to add a thread, highlight, if you will, about all of North Florida. Okay. I'd like to work with you and Allie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Allie would be the right person.
Getting a thread done, and maybe if you guys could have one ready, we can pull it in and make sure this is a future project so that even in our transportation plan.
Sure, we would love to be part of it. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm glad to hear you addressing the food together and the culture that you plan to do with the town area. Are you going to have similar tie-ins to the Palm Beach Station and the city station to development that you're doing?
I think, yes. Our development there is not quite as large. So, like for West Palm Beach, for example, we don't have a lot of room to do much other than a relatively small development area. I wish we did, but I think in regards to, part of what we're doing is connections to Clematis, and making more pedestrian-friendly connections. I don't know, quite frankly, that we've got more into the cultural items there. It's definitely have in Miami yet, but we're also not as far along in either one of those cities. For us, getting Miami solved was the first step because it's such a complex building. We had to get all the development figured out because the trains were going in, and we didn't have the opportunity to do it after the fact. In West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale, we're building a station, relatively small, 30,000 square foot station. And then we have more time to sort of plan in and around those stations. So I think we'll use the same methodology we used in Miami, where maybe not quite so far along in either one of those cities in that respect. Yes, sir.
Great. Can you give us an update on what the plans are? I know you have partnership with freight trains up to the AAF line eventually.
Yeah, I'll be honest, my expertise, I'm sort of just TOD all over Florida, so I don't deal a lot with FECR and how we deal with the freight. I know in general, there's been discussions about trying to move as much of the freight, to the west side, as much of the passenger to the east side. But other than that, quite honestly, I don't have a lot of detail. And then obviously the impact to downtown Miami and getting to the port and those sort of things. I know we're working to make sure we're only running our freight trains at limited hours, late nights and stuff like that, so we're not disrupted downtown.
Freight transportation is something between now the freight trains on the Pacific corridor. It needs to have do that as two crossovers, one at the south side and one at the north side of the Palm Beach. That 2 years ago, I said that I would not just necessary improvements to have those trains those crossovers. So the first one is the southern one is under construction, and that's the one that would allow downtown Miami operate. The second one is should be done that and you would use that one operational to do it from the scope of the DFS time over to the execution. So the earliest that obviously we have to
So that would be one big thing at the bottom of the come off the road.
think we just have time for one or two more questions. So, lady in the back. Yeah, I think we've gone through our normal sort of phase 1, phase 2 remediation, but there again, even Miami and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach, there hasn't been any major contamination issues that I'm aware of from a development perspective. So, your point, typically active freight lines, you always worry about those things about, what's under control, but we've not really come across any real adverse issues yet. There again, you never know until you go into every specific site and start doing work there. But at this point, there's not been any major contamination issues that I'm aware of.
So the target age group that you all have for rentals over here might be interested in car sharing as an option. And so even reserving one of these parking lots that have those, that car share and provide membership is something that if you haven't already considered, you should consider.
Yeah, at each of the stations, yes. So, like for Miami example, we have all our train stations. We have the Cars to Go, Zip Cars, Avis Rent-A-Car, Bike Share. Obviously, got Uber and Lyft, and Miami is apparently not for hours now. But who knows what happens in the future? But I think we've made accommodations for all those. We also have electric car charging stations. We're going to have a shuttle system for each of our stations. So in each of our stations, if you go to Fort Lauderdale, there'll be a shuttle to take you to the airport. There'll be a shuttle to take you to the passenger, the cruise terminal. So we'll have shuttle systems at each of the stations as well. So it'll help provide that last mile transportation leg as well. So we're trying to provide as many of those transportation. But I think, as you say, car sharing, it's back to not needing parking spaces. I think things like car sharing are important because every now and then you need to go to like Walmart and fill up the car with stuff for your apartment, and you can't walk and do that, or you can't always take that on the train. So very similar like you do in New York and Chicago. People need the ability to go get a car for a Saturday and use it, but then that's the only day they need it. And I think that car share is something really important.
If I could just add, speaking of support, you just mentioned that, are there any, you just mentioned support, are you incorporating that in the design of the station lanes?
The port in Miami?
Yeah.
So we have the rail that we call the port lead. The line that you were talking about, the iris that's getting developed now, and the southern terminal they're coming where CSX and Tri-Rail come down towards the airport. We have a rail line that traverses east across there, basically goes to about 79th Street, comes down through Midtown and Edgewater, and then turns basically at our station and goes over to the port. So we have a bridge and sort of have, we have a rail bridge and dedicated access to the port. So we pick containers up from a freight perspective on our rail line, get them off the port, take them to our intermodal center at the Miami Airport, then put them on other trips, trucks or trains, and transport them north. So we have connectivity to the port, but it's all freight at this point, and there's no plans for any sort of like passenger rail service. But there's not much of a destination at the port. I know people have talked about the Bay Link and how do you connect the beach to downtown Miami. We haven't solved this problem. It's way beyond us at this point. So. Anyway, I'll probably wrap it up there. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.